Well, we're going to cross straight to Jerusalem, speak to our correspondent who joins us from there, Irris Makler. Irris, bring us up to date with the latest that we know on this, because it's very sketchy still, isn't it?
It is sketchy, but we are getting more details since the first announcement just hours ago that came from Iranian television. It now appears that Ismail Haniyeh and his bodyguard were killed in a strike, a missile strike, not necessarily an airstrike. That's not yet clear. He was in an apartment owned by Hamas or rented by Hamas, where he regularly went when he was in Tehran. He was there for the swearing in of the new Iranian president, and he and his bodyguard were killed while they were sleeping in the early hours of the morning. We have heard immediately a response from Hamas, both confirming his death, calling it a cowardly act, blaming Israel and vowing retaliation. We've also heard condemnation, by the way, even from the Palestinian president, the rival of Hamas, the Fatah president, Mahmoud Abbas, but stepping in to say that the death of this Palestinian leader is to be condemned.
Suspicion, of course, Irris, falling on Israel for this?
That's right. The natural party that you would look to is Israel. However, there's been no confirmation from Israel. And, you know, in the old days, it's not the first assassination carried out by Israel, nor the first assassination carried out in Tehran, by the way. But there's always been a policy of neither confirm nor deny. And all that seems to have changed and gone out the window since the October the 7th attacks by Hamas inside Israel, which led to this Gaza conflict. For example, last night's attack on a Hezbollah leader in Beirut, that was confirmed almost immediately by Israel, long before Hezbollah has confirmed it. Hezbollah, in fact, still hasn't confirmed it. So we can see the rules are different, but nevertheless, there's neither been a confirmation nor a denial from Israel, though it does seem it would be the natural place to look because they are the natural enemy.
As you said there, it's not the first time, is it, that Israel's carried out this kind of attack specifically on Hamas leaders?
No, that's right. You know, Israel has a history. It's an intelligence war backwards and forwards. And what we have seen is from the early 2000s, Israel killed in the early 2000s 3 of the founding leaders of Hamas. And then since then, over the years, many Hamas leaders, military wing leaders, political leaders have been killed. I myself reported on the killing of Ahmed Jabari in 2012. And I would say if you take a step back and look at it as a policy, it may have a tactical result in the short term, but in the long term, it doesn't stop Hamas from producing replacement leaders, including, of course, Yahya Sinwar, arguably the most effective and the most deadly Hamas leader produced in that organisation since the assassination of those leaders. And let's not forget there was an assassination of a Hamas leader in Beirut, the only other killing carried out in Beirut during this war, Salah al-Aruri killed on January the 2nd. So it's a persistent pattern, but I would have to say with patchy results.
Yeah, persistent pattern, as you said there is presumably Hamas is very, very capable of switching gears, as it were, and shifting somebody very easily else into place.
That's right. And let's not forget, you know, 2 things are significant about this. One is the enormous name recognition that Ismail Haniyeh had, and the second is the location in Tehran, you know, not in Qatar where he actually was based, but in Tehran, you know, taking the fight back to, if you like, the leader, the party pulling the strings, both of Hamas and Hezbollah in this war in Gaza. That's how Israel sees it. But nevertheless, he is not the leader in this Gaza conflict. That is Yahya Sinwar operating out of Gaza. I have to say also he was not a popular leader because since he left the Gaza Strip, there were persistent allegations that he and his sons had enriched themselves, many stories about resentment inside the Gaza Strip of the way he and his sons behaved. And I think that if this had been the killing of Yahya Sinwar, we would be having a different conversation. Nevertheless, there is a vow of retaliation from various leaders, especially from the exiled leadership of Hamas. So yes, they can switch gears put someone else in power, and they can also change the nature of this war in Gaza if they choose.
Irris, let's look a little bit at the wider picture, if you like. I mean, of course, there have been negotiations ongoing for some kind of ceasefire. There are also hostage negotiations going on as well. How does this affect, if it does at all of that as well?
That's right. That's the big question being asked here with no answers. If it was carried out by Israel, or it doesn't even matter if it was or it wasn't, if Hamas believes it was carried out by Israel, will that affect these negotiations? They were stumbling, but they had resumed, and they were at a critical phase right now. So there is a fear in Israel. We haven't heard from civilians in Israel, and we haven't heard from civilians in the Gaza Strip. But what we know is that there is a fear. We know that civilians on both sides do want a ceasefire, that Israeli civilians particularly want the return of however many of the originally 250 hostages, now around 100, however many of them are left alive. They want them returned while they're still alive. And all that must be thrown into question today, particularly if Hamas is vowing retaliation.
And presumably, overall, the biggest question of all, the biggest picture is whether this means the conflict generally across the Middle East could spiral further out of control. Or, I suppose, is there a very slight chance that it could be some kind of full stop?
I wouldn't say it was a full stop because of the nature of Ismail Haniyeh and his place in the organisation. Also, I mean, it is so significant, location, that he was attacked in Tehran. It's a message to Tehran that there's a lot of intel about what goes on there and a lot of capability on the part of some party in the Middle East, or more generally, to attack in Tehran. So those are two significant things. We have heard from Iran right now that there is a meeting being convened to discuss the Iranian response. So no, I wouldn't say this is a full stop. I would fear retaliation, as I think everyone across the Middle East would, but it's not yet clear whether it's a retaliation that will lead to a conflagration that will see this widen intensely, or whether it will still be measured in some sense, because it is not Yahya Sinwar. It is only, I put that in inverted commas, it's only Ismail Haniyeh.
Irris, thanks very much. Irris Makler, our correspondent, talking to us like that from Jerusalem.